I don't need you to get on me. I literally took the dog for a walk this
How long was the
morning.
walk,
The
Molly?
air quality was at 120 and I put on a mask.
All right, your mask was on. Okay, your mask was on.
I said,
Fine.
I'm going to see Michelle later. And if I don't put on a mask, I might be a little out of it. And then she's going to say, why are you out of it? And I'm going to say, well, the air quality is not good. And I took and like, I understand how people feel about me now, Michelle. Like I understand. They're like, sometimes they're like, well, I just did it because I didn't want to hear what you had to say about it. I'm like, good a reason as any.
Exactly. Thank you for wearing your mask to decrease my anxiety. Thank you for wearing your mask in this air quality.
Marsha Linehan, who created DBT, she would say to her patients, you got to keep me happy too.
Exactly. This is
a
mutual,
transactional
okay?
relationship.
Exactly right.
So, team, Michelle, so it's the second time on What You're Craving, but this time she's on What You're Craving as my practitioner, as my nutritionist. Let me bring everybody up to speed. I thought I was allergic to garlic, but you know what my soul said? I'm not allergic to garlic. And then my soul said, I need help. And I went to a functional medicine doctor who was so unhelpful. I had never been to someone so unhelpful in my whole life. This story's main, like the moral of the story is trust your gut. And
Trust
so
the
anyway,
body.
and then I just think Michelle Shapiro, who's on our show right now, is one of the smartest human beings I've ever met in the history of my life. As I told my best friend, Drea, I think she is the second coming of nutrition. I really do. And if you don't know me that well, welcome to the show. If you do know me that well, not a big fan of nutritionists.
Either is Michelle, the dietitian.
That's why I like you so much. So anyway, I called up Michelle and I just begged her because I knew I could cry. I just said, you're the only person I know that can help me. And so we have been working together for 2 months. And Michelle too agreed that I was not allergic to, I did get a little bit from that doctor, but just for us to have better data. And we decided, and the more research I do, the more I'm clear on it, that I'm having a histamine reaction, which means, well, why don't you tell them what's wrong with me? But I really want to talk about the mind-body connection because I want to say, we'll talk about that. I was on an emergency call with Michelle, and the whole time, this is all I'm saying during the call. I'm like, you're such a good nutritionist. I'm like, you're so good at this is really holistic. And I really want to talk about holistic because I think at least for me, when I was so uncomfortable in my body and I needed this weight off, I wouldn't believe that it had anything to do with anything other than what I was putting in my mouth. And if I've learned one thing, which is not true, from this experience working with you and this experience with this diagnosis, is that what I put what I put in my body is it's like 1/4 of this whole thing. So tell me what my diagnosis is really quickly. It's so uninteresting. I don't think anybody really cares, but while we're up.
Yeah. So when you came to me, Molly, again, there's a difference between like a true blue food allergy and the body creating a reaction to something that it's perceiving as foreign. There's sometimes that it is foreign basically for your body and it's creating a different type of reaction. For you had never had any sort of allergies to food before. This was something that felt like totally new to you. And it came really after you had this round of antibiotics.
Right.
And so to me,
a terrible allergy season in North Carolina.
Terrible allergy season in North Carolina. Exactly. And for what kind of we went through the timeline of what happened here. And with a lot of the symptoms that you've actually had, some of them for quite a while, they kind of lined up as this being like an explosion version of the symptoms you've had for a long time. Right. And when we really looked at the timeline, we can kind of draw it back to certain like inflection points. And for you, those antibiotics took you on a different path, basically. And to a point where you felt like, it was so powerful and upsetting for you, Molly. And what I hated hearing was that you were never a person who identified with any sort of like chronic illness. Sure, weight was something that was a part of your life, of course. And this like took you on a path of like, oh, now I have this thing. And it became
I think the other part that was just so overwhelming for me, and talk about like the strategies of like radically accepting and having grief and having feelings. But I'm like, I haven't had sugar and flour in almost 14 years. And I take like very impeccable care of my body largely, right? So it was like, it felt so unfair to
Unfair.
me.
Yeah.
And then I think the other really toxic trait of any problem in our life, which is, oh my God, am I going to have this forever? Like, oh my God, I'm going to be like this and I'm already I'm a recovering eating disorder person. So the whole thing, it's such a beautiful thing that we ask for help and we share how we feel about things because, and I don't know, for me, like spiritually, like I try to always be open to the lesson. And it's like Marsha Linehan also, who created DBT, says that like I'm trying to find meaning in this somewhere. Like I'm open to there being like another reason this is happening, which is maybe me becoming more compassionate, or maybe my relationship with you, which is like so great and even better now. And I'm just open. I'm open to possibility.
Absolutely.
So basically, my sweet little body, my little sensitive extra, decided to have a really big fit and think it's in constant danger all of the time. And the first thing we did was take out a lot of the foods that that was causing me pain.
Absolutely. Which stinks. And I'm not, as
Oh,
you know, Molly, but I want the listener to know, I'm not actually a huge like fan of elimination diets. I'm not a
no.
huge fan. I'm really not a huge fan of long-term elimination diets. But when the body is hyper reactive, the first thing we have to do is make sure that the body's not creating new hyper reactions, right? So it's
Yeah.
like if the fire is burning already, we don't want to pour more fuel on the fire. So
You know what the
if
worst
Molly,
part of it was?
tell me.
I got better. And I took the foods out.
And they were unexpected food, some of them. So this is what I
Right.
explained about specifically, I guess, like to tie in what we suspected was going on with you was some sort of histamine reaction and response, and then ultimately some histamine intolerance. From what you described, you had little tiny like histamine stuff going on throughout your life. But then when I started listing the foods that were high in histamines, you were like, oh, I hate it, but those are the ones I don't feel good while I'm
Yeah,
eating.
it's like she's like vinegar. I'm like, She's like citrus. I'm like, She's like deli meats. I'm like, yep. So
And
terrible.
very unfortunately, a lot of the foods that, and this is what I want to make clear for people who are listening about elimination diets, is like eating a low histamine diet is not a healthier diet.
No.
Elimination diets aren't healthier by nature. And oftentimes they're less healthy because you're not able to include a lot of the foods you want. So I start knowing someone's having a histamine issue when they actually are feeling worse eating healthier. So a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm going to eat my high protein, high veggie diet. I'm eating fruits and all these amazing healthy things. And then they start getting sick. And I'm like, oh, there might be something going on because the body's not perceiving things right. So
So
unfortunately, we
interesting.
found out you were possibly reacting to those things. So that was our kind of first little kind of physical goal was let's not, piss Molly's body off anymore than it's pissed
Right.
off. Let's not instigate the
But it's
reaction.
such an interesting reframe. And I think if you're struggling with anything, right? Like I think I know this from my relationship with sugar. It's like I have some experience when in this idea, which is like when I was eating sugar, I just couldn't stop eating it. And so it's like, yeah, if I'm eating turkey, deli meat turkey, and it's making me sick every time, maybe not eating it is going to help. So here's what I really want to talk about. So by the way, thank you listener for gracing reading my chart with me with Michelle. Now I'm going to talk about you. So here's the deal. I think Michelle is so smart. And because it's hard for me to work with practitioners in general around my food because I have so much diet drama and
Knowledge.
trauma
Yeah.
and knowledge. But
I know.
I think mostly what got me to where I am today and the drive that got me here is how much terrible treatment I've had. And I believe that treatment is out there and still exists. So I'm really particular.
Absolutely.
And so let me tell you this. So Michelle gives me this like battle plan, right? This battle plan. And I'm like, oh my, so I get it like in my email box and I'm like, oh, great. She's going to tell me what to eat. And friends, there was very little about what to eat on this battle plan. There was a lot about waking up in the morning and doing breathing. And there was a lot about before I go to bed. And there was a lot about screen time. And there was a lot about supplements, which I found very interesting. And I have to be honest, because I think a lot of what this thing did was put me a lot in like, maybe not diet mind, but kind of like I was like, my objective is like,
Problem solving.
I don't care about breath, Michelle. I want to eat normally again. So I largely ignored some of this in the beginning
Totally.
because
Understood.
I am just your average Jane when it comes to food. I'm like, I don't care. I was so angry. When I'm angry, I usually turn away from spirituality. So I had to have a whole, you know,
Totally.
come to Buddha and like really turn back to what I knew worked. But I want to say I didn't recognize it. So let us fast forward to a few weeks ago. So I wasn't getting fat. I wasn't getting well as fast as I want to. And I think the other thing that's been so interesting about all of this for me is out of nowhere, I just get really sick. So that's what we were talking about when we started at the top of the hour, like air quality, because my body's in such like a hyper vigilant state, like the air quality will make me really sick. And after I had, I had bariatric surgery. So I'm turning 46. I had it when I was 22. What's that? 25 years ago, almost. I was I was one of the early adapters.
Yeah, that wasn't as
And
much of a thing.
the early failures.
You're an OG.
I'm an OG and also I'm a recidivist of it. But one of the things, because I handled bariatric surgery so poorly, I was a big vomiter in bariatric surgery. We're all getting down and dirty today. I
Yeah,
was a big
let's talk.
vomiter. And so, I mean, so much so that my friends like had an intervention with me in Paris, I was like, don't you guys think I'm doing amazing? They're like, well, we actually thought,
What's the opposite of doing amazing, Molly? That's what we thought. So
so
this
anyway,
is,
yeah.
oh wait,
No,
finish
go
what you were
ahead.
saying.
No, yeah, please.
So it's funny that you're saying that about the battle plan, because you're much like my clients. And when I say battle plan, I call my client plans battle plans, which I'm starting to get away from because I've been going on, like, my friends are like in the military and I'm like, this sounds now insane. Like I feel so guilty when I go on my friends'
Like that.
podcasts and it's like,
Right.
literally my
Like
friend's
chill,
husband is a Navy
chill.
SEAL. And I'm like,
Right.
it's literally not battle like that. But I call it a battle plan because I like to target from every perspective: lifestyle, supplement, breath work, every single way. And it's really funny, but when someone's on the precipice of chronic illness, like or perceived precipice of chronic illness, even, there's a difference. My first thing to do is stabilize the nervous system, because really with chronic illness, it's so much of a game of perceiving threats as much as the actual threats that are happening. And what I didn't want to happen with you, and what I'm very glad to say is not going to happen with you, is I didn't want your brain to get into the mode of, I'm sick, I'm always going to be sick, this is the worst thing that ever happened, it feels unfair.
Right.
Because those symptoms turn on you too. So,
well, I want to pause here, because if you're listening, you're like, well, I don't have a chronic illness. If you're struggling with your relationship with food,
chronic
put that in where we're talking about chronic illness, because I think
anxiety,
that's a
even,
big
right?
thing that's happening with at least people I know, where they're like, see, this one isn't going to work. Like, this isn't going to work either. And I'm never going to get well. And it's just another diet. How is this different? I mean, the amount of people, how is this different, Molly? And it's like, we need to bring your nervous system down. I know.
Have to.
I know, it's very
Yeah. And our nervous systems learn only through example and evidence. And you're a very evidence-based person, Molly. You're a very like, show me it and I'll believe it type of person too. So what I didn't want to do was give you a long list of foods and say, don't ever eat these, because your nervous system was already searching for solutions at the beginning of not feeling well. That's when we're like, all right, problem solving, let me make sure. So if someone comes to me with what feels like a chronic condition at the start of a chronic condition, the last thing I want to do is create a whole new slew of fears for them and a whole new slew of problems. So I like to stabilize the body and the environment with which those foods are going into before we actually focus on those foods.
I don't think it's an easy job, though.
No,
I just don't think
it's not fun. Working with me is not fun.
Because I mean, I get it on my end. And I really, when people are starting like all in coach, I mean, it is like hopeless central with some, tell me how, and it's like, I think one of the big things I've learned here is just like it's a lot of faith. And it's really why you have to feel good about the person who's treating you, like that's one of the things I learned. So I was listening to like 3/4 of what Michelle is saying, which I argue is probably more than most people, right? If I know the data on change.
But you were on it. No, you did your stuff. You did your homework.
I don't know that I was taking this nervous system.
Why would you have, you wouldn't have believed. There's no reason. Again, if our nervous system learns by example, why would you ever have believed me that these things matter? Why would you have believed me that like the air quality was important to the histamine response that you're getting from food. Like you have to see it, and you're a
right.
smart
Well, I
person. So
didn't
are your
even see
listeners.
it. Here's what happened, listener. Well, I one day was home, and this is the second time it happened. So a while ago when the air quality was really bad, I had like I couldn't keep food down. It was just throwing up, throwing up, throwing up. And Michelle gave me some notes. But then this happened, and Michelle said to me, listen, if you throw up again, I really need you to call me. And I listened to about half of that. But this thing happened where I came home really, really hungry. I made this food. Ate it really fast, which is a big thing Michelle doesn't like us to do, which now I understand why, but I want to talk through that. And I threw up. And then Grace said to me, just text her and tell her that. Because I'm like that when I'm working with someone. I'm like, I'd rather deal with it in between
Tell
sessions.
me when it's happening, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
And you say, can you talk quickly? And I say, sure. And so I'm walking my dog and we're talking. And you say to me, do you think this vomiting has anything to do with your nervous system? Let me tell you how good Michelle is at her job, because she says this to me in a way that's so like, it's so underground. Like, like, I don't know, like, here's an idea. You know, I'm so hyper vigilant at that
Just
point.
pitching it. Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I just like vomited and I'm so hopeless. And I'm like, never going to get better. I can't even keep not, I'm in a bad place. And I was like, no, I don't think so, Michelle. And then kind of like slowly as I go, because, you know, if you know me at all, like there's all different kinds of no's with me. And that no is the one I have to reevaluate. And I started to talk to Michelle about actually how reminiscent that vomiting was of bariatric surgery. And anyway, we started to untangle it a little bit. And it was like it was like the biggest aha moment I've had in years. And I was like, oh, because here's what Michelle said to me and I want you to talk. Michelle's like, well, what did you say about your own vomiting? Remember?
Yeah, so I grew up in a household that was like so phobic of vomiting. My mom it's a literal like emetophobia. Like she cannot vomit. If I was vomiting as a kid, she would kick me out of the house and be like, go stay at your friend's house because you cannot sleep here. I can't deal with it. So I told Molly, I was like, I would soon, like if I vomited for any reason or if I had like snake venom in my body and the only way to like survive was to vomit it out, like it wouldn't happen. Like
you're
it
like,
just
I'd
doesn't
rather
happen.
be hospitalized.
I would be hospitalized.
I've never heard something like that before.
Exactly. Like there's just vomiting to me is such a serious thing that I would never do to release or for any positive reason. It would just never occur to my body to do that. So by the time I'm vomiting, like it's so serious. And I wanted to know for you, Molly, is that the same? Like, is it so forbidden? Is this something that's so foreign from you? Or is this something that we know?
Surgery, I'm like, no, it was easy peasy lemon squeezy. So anyway, long story long, because then we're going to have Michelle teach us today. But like, long story long is like, oh my God, my anxiety and my, I don't know, endocrine or whatever it is, I want you to tell me is impacting this diagnosis so significantly.
Absolutely.
So can you and then I just kept on saying on the phone, I'm like, you are a holistic nutritionist. This is so holistic. You know, because honestly, when it comes to my relationship with food, when I'm not in my wise mind, I'm like, fix it. And you're like, it's not just the food. I mean, in my wise mind, I say the same thing, but I want you to explain to us this whole thing.
It's funny. I think like the people who talk the least about food are like functional dietitians. Like we're so after, you know, I've been in a dietitian for 9 years. I've seen over 1,000 clients. And like what you learn is that like food's not the game. Food is a piece of the puzzle and it can be extremely healing or extremely instigating. I don't want to say damaging, but it can be instigating, but it is not, in my opinion, like the game. The game is how your mind and your body interact. And I always like to say also, our mind and our body are not even, I don't even like mind body connection. They're the same thing. It's just a part of your body, right? Like there's no difference between your mind and your body. It's the same. And so like I'm now over the mind body connection conversation. I'm like, oh, just your like what body are you speaking to? Your physical body, your energetic body, maybe your spiritual body, but you don't cut off your head and then the rest of your body's different than your head. It's all one thing. And what I notice in any sort of chronic condition, like you said, it could be a chronic behavior pattern, it could be a chronic thought pattern, it could be a chronic illness.
Let's talk about it for a second.
Yeah.
In like diet drama and trauma. Let's talk about it with people who are having a really hard time settling into a relationship with food, and so they get dysregulated and then they binge, and like let's we don't need to talk about me. It's not enough of me. Like, let's talk about it with that, and
we'll bring back the Molly stuff because it's important. Sure. And I think that there's a time when every practitioner, even Molly, learns the lesson that very unfortunately we have a responsibility over how we feel.
Yep.
And that is the nervous system piece. And it kind of sucks, by the way, because I wish I could just go to practitioners and be like, and I wish my clients come to me and I'm like, let me take this illness from you, right. But it actually
just fix what you eat. Like, just stop eating this thing.
Oh my God. I would be like the happy boop, boop, boop. Here, take this food out. Like, that would be awesome. And that's just not the work. That's just not the work. It's when we realize that any physical symptom or experience we have, we will talk about the dieting piece 100%, is part of physical experience we're having. So if it's pain, discomfort, fear, anything like that. And then kind of the most important thing is the reaction we have to it. So I will take you through an example of something like binge eating, for instance. So someone might say, I really want to lose weight. I've really had a crappy day. So we start getting triggers and symptoms and signs from our body. So our body will be like, oh, my stomach feels a little weird. I'm actually a little bloated. I don't like that feeling. I don't like that feeling. And then our body's like, how do I get rid of that feeling? Oh, I could eat something. That'll give me something. And it will. It actually creates a dopamine response. It actually feels good. And then we go back and our body goes, no, wait, that's going to make us feel crappy. That's going to make us gain weight. That's not going to help us. And then we have another response that goes, no, but it will actually work right now. So let's just do a little bit, and we'll just do a little bit right now, and then we'll see. And then ultimately another voice kind of comes in and says, let's just do it. The screw it voice that we all know so well, right?
I need to be out of this pain. I don't really care about the consequences.
Exactly. Because the consequences won't matter because I am actually going to feel better in the short term. So why would our smart brains favor a long-term thing over a short-term thing? We want the short term. It's going to make us feel better now. And what's happening and what's missed so often, even in binge eating, is that, again, we think binge eating is this thing where you just spontaneously go, screw it, I'm going to do it. No. The whole binge eating piece is what happens before that. It's from that first thought you have and the reactions to the thoughts that you have and the reaction to the sensations we have. Binge eating is caused by physical symptoms just as much as it's caused by mental conversation. And what people don't realize is at the end of the day, they're like, ugh, I don't feel good.
What do you mean by physical symptoms? Because I think we all understand the mental piece. Like, we all understand
right?
That
restriction or stress or those kind of things, right?
Okay, but like, can we talk through stress? Because I feel like everyone I talk to who's struggling is so stressed.
100%. Yeah. So what is going to happen in times of prolonged stress is there's a different hormonal cascade that happens, vitamin and mineral usage that happens. So when you have leftover cortisol or adrenaline hanging around in your bloodstream, it creates uncomfortable sensations that could create, again, bloating for you. It could create a little tiny headache. It could create something like a little heart pounding, a little dizziness, a little bit of discomfort that's just enough for you to want to kill it, for you to want it to end.
Right.
And a lot of times,
and not on a conscious level, right? It's
not
like
at
that
all.
little.
Well, it can be if we work on it, but otherwise,
right. But not untreated. It's
absolutely
like,
not. Yeah,
you don't really notice it. And probably if you're in and out of it so often, then it's just like another day at the ballpark.
And it becomes so much of binge eating, so much of chronic illness becomes a part of our identity, and then we can't see out of it. So like, I would find it very abnormal from a health standpoint if someone was feeling headachy and bloated and constipated every single day and feeling like they have to binge eat every single day, right? But if that's the life you live, it doesn't feel abnormal to you. And this is also just from a societal standpoint, which you and me always bring it back to. Also, like, the normalization of illness is so present now that it's just like, you know what? It's okay if you feel bloated by the end of the day. That's normal. It's normal. It's okay. If you binge eat, it's okay. It's not that everything's not okay, but it's not
normal,
actually healthy or normal.
Right.
Yeah. And it's
like,
okay.
You can sustain that way, but do we want to be living optimally is the question.
And I think with binge eating, with all these things, the biggest thing, and with all chronic illness, is we have to immediately de-identify ourselves from it. So it's like, I'm a binge eater becomes a different thing. Right. And you talk about this all the time too, Molly, but it's like, or I am Molly, I have a garlic allergy now. You were so good at this because you were like, nah,
Yeah.
that's not my thing.
I'm like, no,
That's not
thanks.
going to be my thing.
My mom's like,
De-identify.
are you carrying an EpiPen? I'm like, well, I am, but I don't have a garlic allergy. I'm only doing to just keep you quiet, you know?
Exactly. Yes, mom. I have
Yeah,
the
sure have
EpiPen
the
with me.
EpiPen. Don't need it because I don't have a garlic allergy.
But when we attach our identity to these things, we prove to our nervous system that something is wrong and that something has to be wrong. So we have to be so conscious when you start experiencing symptoms to just experience them, experience thoughts. So if it's binge eating again, when you hear the thought, don't say I am the thought, like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, but just consciously observe the thought. Sit with the thought.
But I think that's, you know, when you're so uncomfortable in your body and you're in so much shame about this cycle that you're living in and you're experiencing all that, because what you're saying about not experiencing thought takes this practice of mindfulness. And when you're looking and you're stressed and you only have a certain amount of time in your day, it's so easy to deprioritize the practice of mindfulness
Correct.
because I have to pick up my kids and because I have my job and because like I have to like drink my shake or whatever it is. And like, as I'm starting to understand this now on a different level, I obviously understood this in some ways because whatever, but I have to tell you, I have to really honest, like, I'm not sure I really understood this as profoundly as I understand it now, which is if we don't learn how to regulate our nervous system and let these thoughts go down the river, as we say, and all this like Thich Nhat Hanh stuff, like, I don't know if we can optimally heal. What do you think?
There is no healing if your nervous system's not regulated. I'm going to be more straight up than you just were. It just doesn't, it's not a healing state for you to be in.
Well, it's
And
not
I'll
a
also say
luxury,
that,
I think, is like we all think like that's that we do the food and then we do the other stuff. And it's like, I think I might have to rewrite this book.
well, which is why I have to rewrite my book, but it's also, that's so funny.
It's true.
I like how that's like the worst thing. Like it's
Well, I
like
have
you
like
roll
this
down
book
the
out
hill.
that's like food. I mean, there's a whole chapter. It's about the food and it's not about the food, but it's like, I don't even know if we can get to the food if we're so dysregulated as per my, like, I need it. I said to you, no, nothing's wrong with my nervous system. I just needed to throw up. And you're like, I would rather be hospital. Like I couldn't even in that moment of being in a heightened nervous system state, I couldn't separate the truth from the false. And imagine that, take my throwing up as your binging listener.
Sure.
And you have to do it. I know that feeling. You know that feeling.
Totally. And it also, what we have to realize is that it like literally helps. So even for you, Molly, vomiting was serving a function for you.
Absolutely.
You weren't doing it to make yourself feel bad. No one binge eats to make themselves feel worse. People always say this, I'm such a saboteur. I'm like, why would you sabotage yourself? You're not actually doing it from a masochistic standpoint. There are things we do, but I would say a vast majority of binge eating comes from, I feel really not good and I need to get rid of this feeling. And that is so,
I need to feel safe. I think the saboteur often comes from, I feel so unsettled. I feel so unstable. I know this makes me feel grounded and safe, even if it's grounded, safe, and like crap. It's still grounded and safe overrides all desire function of the nervous system.
it absolutely does. And our nervous system wants us to feel safe and wants us to find those safeties. And sometimes the only tools that we have to feel safe are ones that might hurt us on the back end, so to speak, right? I think for you, again, the vomiting was something that was hilariously so familiar to you, though. It was something that you knew how to like, I feel like there's poison building in my body kind of feeling, and I need to get rid of it and take the pressure cooker off. But then what was happening was that, yes, it was helping you in the short term, but then you were reacting to it like, holy crap, something's very, very wrong. I'm not healing. I'm not healing. I'm not getting better.
Oh,
this
it's so tricky. And it's so like binging because, as you and I both know, but the listener might not, I mean, there is such a dopamine release from purging. This is not to encourage purging, but I mean, it was this huge release of dopamine and then this huge release and then this huge fear. My poor endocrine system was like, I'm tired even just thinking about it. And I want you to listen to this. I know if you're in a body that you feel uncomfortable in, like I get that feels primary. but
to get rid of the
sustain,
bad feelings.
to get rid of
Yes.
the weight, you know?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
all I'm learning here, and I understand I'm doing this in a body that, you know, I'm less uncomfortable in this learning. It's like, I just think like we have to figure out a way to do it where we don't get trapped in that diet cycle. And part of it is learning how to attend to these other parts of it that aren't food.
Absolutely. And I think diets are very safe. Diets are very, very
Aren't
safe, and
they?
they create great safety for us because they're structured, they're black and white. And for many people, they produce short-term results.
Right.
And
Well,
short-term
that's the hook.
results
Mhm.
validate our nervous system, right? Our brain learns, oh, this good, this worked, this good. People with intuitive eating or anything else like that, they don't get the validation of weight loss, so they go, I don't get it because the thing didn't happen that I want to happen. So we might feel better about our relationship with food, but the safety we're craving in validation of what our brain wants doesn't come often. So I would also say that, you know, I like intuitive. We talked intuitive in our last episode about like my pros and cons of intuitive eating and things like that. But
Oh, well, you know, the smartest thing you say in the whole world is like that intuitive eating is it's a luxury item for those who can use it, you know, and if you're struggling with an addiction or you're struggling with all this other stuff, it's not something, it's not even a tool that can get into your toolbox.
it's not yours yet, and it can be, but it is truly a privilege and a luxury to be able to prioritize a relationship with food. When, I mean, I work with people who are like very sick, and what I was gonna say is that also, so I have a colleague, Stephanie Mara Fox, who's trademarked this term. She's an amazing therapist too, and she's trademarked this term, somatic eating. And she says somatic eating is the step before intuitive eating. And what that means, somatic is of the body. So it just means connecting with what your body is communicating with you and understanding it before you favor what your mind is telling you.
But I just
basically.
want to highlight, because I'm a little nervous that you and I are saying that intuitive eating is a positive, and I'm actually like, I think it's not for everybody.
I don't think it's for everybody. I think having a positive relationship with food is for everybody.
Well,
but
me
not
too, but I don't
possible
think that
at
has
certain
to be.
times.
I think that this is sort of what I think. I think after some time, in my experience with people in food addiction, after some time, it does become intuitive if you're defining intuitive as integrated. Like I'm an integrated food addict. Like I
like integrated too.
like I was at this dinner and someone's like, "Are you just so upset you can't have dessert?" I was like, "Well, I don't even think about it. That's not. I have no feeling about that. It's not something I do." And it's not in this like I'm gonna gain
And that's what
weight.
integrated means.
Right.
I
I
like
would
that.
call it, I wish we
It's
could
just
call
who
it,
you
instead of
are, right?
intuitive eating, we call it integrated eating. Right. But when we're sitting here and so reactive on our emotions and so reactive about our weight and so like we need guardrails. And what we're saying today, which is attention to something that isn't food.
100%. I
If
think
you're going to really heal.
it's really, you know, we're talking a big game when it comes to, oh, if you feel something negative, just experience it. But in that actual moment, I'm going to also tell people, take bites out of how you're feeling. Like, don't necessarily just jump in both feet. I feel so icky, and start to realize how icky you feel. Like, if you need to also just, I do this thing with my clients where I'm like, wave your right arm 5 times, left arm 5 times, right leg, left leg. Sometimes you need to shake off if you're not feeling comfortable, but there's kind of 3 paths we can go down when we feel uncomfortable. We can squash it with something that's like not maybe the best for us, but going to give us a major relief. We can sit and tolerate it and just, you know, grin and bear it, or we can explore it. And we can
I also think the second one, we can distract ourselves while it's passing. I know it's like sit,
totally,
on your chair and say, okay, come on, trauma, right?
You don't need to take it all. Exactly. You can take info from it and then move past it. But what the space of healing that is the most important is from the moment you start feeling symptoms and how you listen to them. And those symptoms could be thoughts, and those symptoms can be physical symptoms. And I think that is where
it's so about getting like in touch with your body though. And it's like, you know, and I think that diet culture, especially, I actually oddly think the intuitive eating movement, at least for like me and my people, because when I did intuitive eating, they were so invalidating of my discomfort in my body that I threw out those suggestions until like a month ago. I was like, it was so invalidating that I rebelled against those because they were like, you're not allowed to lose weight. This is the weight that you're supposed to be. And I was 320 pounds, Michelle.
You went to an intuitive eating person when you were that weight, and that's what you got from the experience. I'm sorry to hear that.
That's what I was told from the experience, that I just, and that there was no nutrition help. It was all.
Yeah, that's my big ethical. That's my big ethical problem.
I mean, I was just talking to somebody yesterday who was on it was on last week's podcast, and like her A1C is like, 10.3. She can't get surgery for cancer, and they're telling her to intuitively eat. This is another story for another time.
By the way, oof. I'm very sorry to hear about that experience.
This is why we love Michelle. This is why Michelle is the What You're Craving nutritionist. I know it's really like,
you can't favor, as I always say, you cannot favor a psychological solution for a physical problem.
Absolutely.
You cannot. And especially with something like diabetes, which has imminent risk, especially if she wants to get surgery for cancer. Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah, wait, I want to ask I want to ask 2 questions. You and I can do a podcast for 17 years. So I have 2 questions.
Have we been on a while already? Who knows?
Yeah,
we're in a different time zone. Yeah, exactly. That's fine.
Exactly. Okay. I'm telling you. And anytime I see a podcast that's longer than like an hour, I'm like, can't do it. Not for me.
Literally won't listen.
Don't understand what my time is worth. Anyway, so I like to keep it short. She'll be back. Can you tell me why? Okay, I don't want to say we need to. Why it's this thing about, like, as one in your battle plan, it was like, sit down, like sip your water, chew your food, which just to me from my intuitive eating trauma, I'm like, don't tell me how I'm supposed to drink. Don't tell me how I'm supposed to eat. But as I start to understand all of this, especially as the desired state of our nervous system is rest and digest. But can you walk us through like why it might be something we want to look at, even if we just want to be like losing weight?
100%. Yeah. If people ask me on podcasts, like, what are your big digestive tips? It's always going to be to eat slowly. And they're like, no, tell us lemon water. And I'm like, nah, it's eat slowly. Thinking about our digestion as being this like very lengthy and very complicated process, the last thing we want to do is make things rushed or more complicated or more stressful on our digestive system.
Why?
Many of us are suffering from already digestive issues in some capacity, but if things do not
what would you call digestive issues in some capacity?
I mean, it could be, if it's upper digestion, it could be, GERD, reflux. If it's lower digestion, it could be IBS, IBD. It could be liver. It could be the accessory organs.
So this reflux stuff is largely is maybe
Yes.
behavioral and emotional, and not necessarily pharmaceutical.
I mean, the reflux stuff is also, so I have to walk us back for a second. I'm sorry. I know we're going to go so hard in the time. I'm sorry.
We'll probably just cut out a lot of my story, which is very uninteresting.
No, I think it's so important. So specifically with your story with the histamines, Molly, which I think is really powerful, is that there's a condition called mast cell activation syndrome. And what they're finding with people with long COVID is that we had no idea what the heck people were manifesting all these random symptoms from long COVID and couldn't put our fingers on it. And what we've now found is that long COVID is basically a form of mast cell activation syndrome, which basically is, I would use the phrase, your body is allergic to stress, the environment. Your body is like allergic to things that normally it is not, and like allergic to being alive a little bit and certain things, and is hyper reactive to those things. So what happens is if foods do not go correctly through your digestive tract, and if things leak out, which can happen if you're having maldigested food, if your bacteria don't have time to get to it, if you don't have the right balance of bacteria, which is also stimulated and triggered by our vagus nerve that connects with our stomach. If all those things do not come into alignment, what can happen is the wrong types of foods and chemicals can leak out of your gut and your body can mount a response on it. So if you have maldigested protein and it is going, basically you have these really long chains of amino acids. And then by the time it goes to your small intestine, it's supposed to be one amino acid. If you send some chains down there, your small intestine's like, what the heck did you just send me?
Right.
And that can mount that entire histamine response. And that can mount your body to promote and produce more acid to try to kill and make things right. Because that's what denatures the proteins and makes them those individual amino acids. So if your body is dealing with a hyperreactivity or an autoimmunity, it's essential that you chew slowly, not only for the reason of stimulating your vagus nerve properly, which happens during chewing, to send that parasympathetic rest and digest all the processes of the body happening, all the acid being sent at the right time. It's a timing game. And so you have to give your body time to do that. And if your body's hyper reactive to things going wrong, you don't want things to go wrong. You want things to go right so that your body doesn't produce that new response.
We're basically like, I wish somebody would have explained this. I mean, I don't regret the past, but I really think if somebody would have sat down and explained to me that this is why I needed to eat slow, because my body can't process the food because my body's in a constant trauma state. And how in the world is it supposed to digest it in a way that's useful? I might have listened.
Yeah, I think it's also, I mean, quite literally, your mind running can cause the sympathetic nervous system to activate, which will stop digestion. It literally will stop digestion. It does not allow digestion to go.
I was just telling you this. This is so crazy. But yesterday, my sweet co-regulating dog was like, he was like so anxious. And finally occurred to me, I'm like, I'm not breathing. Like, I'm anxious. I didn't even know I was anxious until my poor sweet healer dog was like,
till he absorbed it for you.
Danny's like, I'm really anxious. Can you please breathe? That would be really nice. And I was like, oh my God.
Literally looking at you to breathe. We should all be so lucky to have a Danny though, because we are all running around so dysregulated. And you know what, Molly? I have to check myself. I'm a practitioner who's been doing this with 1,000 people. And there are times in my life when, you know, I had a neck injury recently.
Yeah.
And then I started getting like heart rate issues from the neck stuff. And I was like, hold on. Well, it's normal because what regulates your heart rate's in your neck. But I was like, oh, damn, I still have to do the work. I was like, oh,
please.
I still have to
welcome
too.
To histamine reactions, queen, you know?
Exactly. And I'm the queen of histamines myself. That's why I feel honestly fortunate in some ways that I've had so many different brands of chronic illness, but my game is the nervous system. And with anyone struggling with chronic illness, the one message I want to give is that you will, just in the moment that you say, I am going to heal, I am going to lose weight, I'm going to do these things, your nervous system's listening to you every second. So it hears you. You can put conscious input in through breath work, through thoughts, through actions in any way.
This is my like final question, if you can believe it. I mean, there's more of Michelle. We're actually planning something for the winter. That's all I'm going to say, because right now we're focused. It's not even summer yet. Well, it is summer, but winter. There's more of us to come. So whether you like it or not, if you were like going to give us, so I really think that slow chewing is so important, and breath, but like for you, if you had to give us top 3, top 5 actionable things to work on, here's the scale, which is easiest, most effective, like least amount of commitment, most output. What would you say?
Love it. I would say, so least amount of commitment is do 5 minutes of breath work every day. That's the least amount of commitment. 5 minutes of breath work.
What do you call it?
I like 4, 7, 8 or 4, 5, 6 breathing. Breathe in for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. You can do that for maybe 10 times to start off with.
Love that. Okay.
Anyone can do that anytime.
That is reasonable.
No excuse.
So you don't even have to set your timer for 5 minutes. Just
you're not going to like my longest ones.
Yeah.
No one's going to like my longest ones. My longest ones are write an entire timeline of your health. Understand where your health took different directions, where your life took different directions, so that you can understand where you're going. So inventory your life, inventory your symptoms, inventory how you feel, the connections you have, your environment, and then ask yourself, what is the 10% of things I can do to move myself forward? But get to know yourself and your body. So that's my like most ridiculously high level, hardest question.
That's hard. Can you give us easy way?
Yeah. I'm like, all right, 5 minute breath work.
You know what? I'm just going to answer the question how I want to.
I would say be mindful of exactly. Well, no, that was my hardest one. My easiest one is I like the eating in a mindful environment. I would also say just
let's call that what it is. So the number 1 you're saying is breath work, but number 2 is focusing on sitting down for a meal.
Not in front of a TV.
Not in
sitting down.
And by TV, you mean anything that has blue light attached to
it.
Exactly. Which is also a phone. A phone is a television. That's what Will Cole taught me that many years ago.
It's worse than a television because it has more blue light actually. And it's going directly into your face. Thank you, Will Cole. I would say in the act of eating too, what I like to have clients do that's a very tangible thing you can do to eat more mindfully is just ask yourself where the food came from. how could this food have gotten here? Like, what journey did this blueberry take to get here? Like, how, where
that
did this
just
cow
helps us to
live?
slow down because we're thinking about it.
No, I think it just helps us to connect with food. I think of food as
Oh,
being
that's
a
so
like,
lovely.
yeah, and I think of food as being literally the elixir of life, right? It is the
But these
vital
like,
life
I need
force.
these like low grade skills. That's like
Just
very
take
high
2 minutes.
grade.
Think of when it's coming in. All right, so you want
I
your
want breath. I like this thing about not having a
yeah,
phone
of
with
course.
you, sitting and eating in a way
Yeah.
that's really slow
And that's what I'm saying. Take a
and
minute to
chewing.
think about to connect with the food. In that, it will slow you down also because
Yeah.
you're viewing
That's what I think.
food as something that's really important, and something that is
That's really nice. I appreciate that.
yeah, exactly. I think that it also will slow people down. And I would say another, just like you want like a nutrition tip, you want something like that people can do
No, I just
health
think like,
wise.
no,
Like,
I think of my battle plan. My battle plan has eat really slowly, sip your drinks, don't gulp them, breath work, like meditation. I mean, I just want to know what you think we
yeah,
can do ancillary to make ourselves like, not be
I
in
think
binge eating GERD life.
I call these the acts of being human. Like, just be a person, basically. And how do you be a person? You get natural sunlight in the morning. I think that's really important. I think that you're not using your phone before bed. I think you're talking to people you actually like during the day.
How
Where
long
like
before bed do you want us to put our phone down?
2 hours would be
Whoa.
ideal. Sleep in a very
what is
cold.
like least amount I put my phone down before bed? Like what's the least?
I mean, whatever the least amount is for a person. If it's 30 minutes, it's 30 minutes. As much time as you can get between your phone and sleep is better, because our phone emits blue light, which literally blocks the production of melatonin.
Yeah. Michelle also says you should, I don't do this, but maybe I'll start. Put your phone on do not disturb on a different part of the room.
Yeah. I know it's so funny because I texted my mom. I sleep from 8 to 4 these days, and I texted my mom at like 4:45 a.m. and was like, "Hey, I had to ask
You're
her
like
something."
a monk.
And she was like, "It's so weird." Yeah, it's like this whole thing. Everyone's like, "Don't you have a husband and friends?" And I'm like, "They'll see me when they see me.
Whenever I'm
That's
ready.
fine. I don't care." But I texted my mom at 4:45 a.m. and she was like, "How could you text me at that time? Like, I can't believe." And I was like, "Who has their phone on sound? Do people have their
A
moms?
lot of moms.
Jewish moms from Queens
A lot
have
of
their
my mother and your mother. My mom has
Exactly.
three ringtones on because she has 3 children.
That's very cute and sweet.
I guess
But I
it's
also,
a little, I mean, what are you going
but
to
I
do?
was like, don't have your phone on sound. I'm like, that's an insane thing to do. To have your, what are you?
I mean,
I'll call your house phone. And so I was like, get out of here. This is weird. But I would say, yes, keeping your phone distance from you. And that's just part of, Molly, the practices that I always tell people. Don't make your life harder than it has to be. If you know you're a person who's addicted to your phone, we all are. Don't put your phone in front of your face because you're going to pick it up and use it. Make things easier for yourself. If you know that, again, if you know you're not going to drink water, put water in front of your face. Like, put the things you need in front of you.
All right.
And
Tonight
make your life
starts
easier.
my 20 minutes phone off before I go to bed.
I dig that.
And other side of the room, do not disturb, will not pick it up for 30 minutes until I wake up in the morning.
Should I test you at 4 a.m. and see if you don't answer?
Yeah. I mean, I sleep. I'm not interested, but I'm going to try that starting today.
Beautiful.
All right. This is where we end, although we have so much more to talk about, but that's always the case with us. You are,
I can't believe that was
like, so first of all, if you haven't from the last episode, but I think you have, if you're not following Michelle on social media, you're losing out. You're missing out.
I just did, by the way, what's going to come out next week. I don't know when this is going to air, but it should be out already. An episode on like the practice of healing, literally what you have to do. And it's a lot of the concepts we talked about today, and even at even more, detail, even though you and I like somehow we barely scratched the surface. We've been talking for an hour. Like I literally, we could do this for 2 days straight and never end. Yeah, exactly. So if people want to listen to the pod, it's called Quiet the Diet. They can listen to the podcast.
Quiet the Diet pod. Michelle on social. Michelle doesn't take patients, but she's an amazing, who I've worked with also, Nikki, who does individual work. They are so talented. I can tell you firsthand, they are so talented. When I'm in session with Michelle, I'm always like, why are we not filming this? Why? Because it's her and Nikki's treatment it's just different level. And it's different level. It's smart in a different way. I love you. You're a wonderful friend. You're a wonderful practitioner. Thanks for saving my life. And stay tuned. There's more Molly and Michelle to come. There's more.
Oh, yes.